She went on a Viking cruise earlier in the fall. Isn't that blessed?
She can't wait to return.
There we go. Sure. You have 1 minute.
I
Am I gonna
love-
do?
I love my job and I love working, but I also kind of love the idea of I'm doing like part-time consulting.
The number of, over the course of my time, people that have worked and after retirement, and then were subsequently died, like within weeks or months following. I'm like, oh my God, like, I'm 55.
I like the
I'm
shuttle.
I'm working for myself sometimes. What are you chasing?
We can reconvene our meeting to open session. The board has been in executive session since 6 o'clock to discuss a personnel matter, a contractual matter, and a student matter. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Introductions.
Dave Hurst.
Catherine Nadeau.
Robert Tejan.
Jody Monroe. Holly Dellenbach.
Ewan McLean.
Willow Bear.
John McPhillips.
And John Walston is unable to be here this evening. Do we have any PIG students here tonight? Welcome. Thanks for coming. Your obligation is to stay until 9 o'clock or when the meeting is over, whichever one comes first. And when we are done, please come up and sign out on one of the sheets that is up here on the board table. That way you make sure you get credit for being here. First is our approval of minutes. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the minutes from the March 20th, 2024 regular board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. 3, meeting reports, and first is our superintendent's report.
Sure, thank you. So as I mentioned in a couple prior meetings, that we did have an RFP out for universal pre-K. We've done this for the last few years and have not been successful in getting a partner to work with. However, I believe at this time we do have a provider who we'll be able to work with for the coming year, which will involve registration of our preschool students as well as a lottery system. So at the next board meeting on April 24th, we'll do a short presentation about how people can gather more information, register for that program, and participate in the lottery system. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to offer that to some of our pre-K students. It will be limited though for the first year. So we'll see how that goes.
Do you have any general idea of what the time frame is for like the application
Yep.
process?
So we're still setting that up in our student management system for the registration, because currently we don't have UPK registration process. It's a little bit different. But we're looking to have that up and ready right around the time of the next board meeting, so we can then send out information to families, put it out there broadly so everyone has information about how they go about registering. There'll be information on our website and a process for what's required in order to register. And then we would have that open for families for anywhere to 4 to 5 weeks, and then we would go through the lottery process. So we're talking probably the end of May, early June for the selection of the lottery. Okay, so I'll have a little more details and timeframes at our next board meeting.
Okay.
Did you have a question?
Do you just have an approximate number of how many slots people should expect?
Right now, it's 40. Yep.
And would we issue another RFP in future years to build additional capacity or see how this one works?
Right, the goal would be to either potentially gain more classrooms with the provider if all goes well, or look to partner with additional providers. There are some districts who partner with 3 to 4 providers. Some of the larger districts partner with as many as 6 or 7, and they have, different numbers of classrooms in each of those areas. So that would be the goal. So we're happy to have at least one as a starting point. So.
You don't have to answer this tonight, but for the presentation itself, would you look into approximately how many pre-K eligible kids we think we have at this point?
Right.
So that we have a sense of
Yep.
how much, how many we can provide, how much need there is, all that
Right.
good stuff.
And the good thing about having the preschool registration is that will move along the kindergarten registration numbers, which sometimes we've been struggling to get the registration numbers, so it'll help us in predicting our kindergarten numbers a little bit better and a little bit earlier too. So, great bonus. And the only other announcement I wanted to share was that we did have an aide to students with disabilities, Karen Maloney, pass away recently on Sunday, April 7th. She was employed by the district for more than 20 years. She'd worked at the middle school as well as recently at Slingerlands Elementary, so I just wanted to mention her and her years of service and to keep her friends and family in our thoughts.
Thank you. Any questions for Jody? Next are board reports. With the break, it feels like it was a while ago, but I wanted to congratulate all of the cast and crew and parents and teachers that put Sweeney Todd together. It was a tremendous production, and I really enjoyed it myself. But I just wanted to really say congratulations to them, and really appreciated how much work went into that. And then I also just wanted to thank everybody, particularly at the middle school, who helped with all of our Eclipse watchers on Monday. Because I heard it was quite a good event over there for everybody. So does anyone have anything else they want to share? Ewan?
A couple small things. There's a naturalization ceremony happening at the high school, right, on Friday.
On Friday.
As someone who went through this a year ago, it's actually the same judge that naturalized me. She does a wonderful job. It's going to be a really meaningful moment for those folks. So I'm going to turn up. But I just thought it was really nice to have that here.
Yeah, if you haven't let
I
Brittany
told
know if
Brittany,
you're
yeah,
coming,
she knows,
just
yeah.
let her know so we make sure we include everyone.
The other thing is, I get to, a BCHS alumnus, Aidan McNay, that's my elder son, was awarded the Cornell Presidential Scholarship as the outstanding scholar at Cornell this year. And the cool thing for the district is he got to nominate a teacher who was a formative influence, which was David Beck, his music teacher in Australia. And so David now gets to award a scholarship to a BCHS student from Cornell for someone who's going to go to Cornell in a subsequent year. There's a nice kind of building relationships, but also giving a financial benefit to the next student that needs it from here, which is pretty cool.
Thanks for
Oh,
sharing.
that's super cool. Thank you for sharing.
I'm pretty proud.
Anybody else?
Well, I'll follow up on the music. My understanding from the, we are informed that the music department has been recognized as, I think, one of the best communities for music education. So a shout out to the music department, to the parents, to the students, and everybody else involved. It's a great recognition and a great job being done.
Next are student reports. Do we have anybody from Student Senate here?
Hi, my name is Yuna Chung, and I'm one of the co-presidents of the Student Senate. Recently, at the high school, we've been helping to organize the second annual Eagle Challenge, which is a community-wide event that will take place in this year. And we've been discussing ideas like having face painting, touch-a-truck events, and bounce houses at the event. Thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you. Anyone from the middle school here tonight? I don't think so, but just double checking. Next is our presentation, and we've got Dave Hurst presenting on K-12 scheduling.
Okay, thank you. So I've been asked to provide sort of a high-level view of what the scheduling process is for K-12, and as you can imagine, it differs quite a bit depending upon level. So we'll start with elementary, where, in terms of what we look at before we even go into the scheduling practice or process, there's sort of 6 things that we really try to accomplish, and you'll see that we have several sort of competing interests that don't allow you to necessarily achieve all of these goals, right? At least on a sort of widespread across a grade level basis at every single building. They might happen within individual classrooms, but I'll speak a little bit more about some of these issues. We would want, like, what I need time, so student intervention time, you would want that to be the same for like all 3rd grade students at the same time, right? But just because of the way our specials work and things of that nature, it's not always possible to do that like every single day. So the 6 best practices really is we want to make sure that our instructional time is aligned with the standards in the curriculum, obviously. And with that, the recommendations are 90 minutes for ELA and 60 minutes for math at a minimum every single day. And the recommendation for that is actually uninterrupted time, right? And that's a key piece that, again, because of the way schedules play out with specials and lunches and recess, is not always accomplished, especially for ELA. But because we could break things up into sort of a reading component and a writing component, that's where it might be like a 60-minute reading component in the morning and then a 30-minute writing component in the afternoon. Like that tends to work out. But you don't want to have things so fragmented that you're doing 20 minutes and then a break and then 20 minutes and then a break. It just becomes very disjoint. Trying to schedule what many refer to as what I need time by grade level. And again, that's just what students need. So some students might be working on math. Some students might be working with the teacher in the back on reading goals. Some students might be working on a project off to the side. And then it kind of varies by day what students need. Some students are doing independent reading. But it's a time, by scheduling it across grade level, it really helps because then students that do receive services, they're all being pulled out at the same time as opposed to trying to figure out, like, when can I pull this student for speech from classroom A and classroom B when there's no common time like this? Because for pull-out sessions like that, we don't want to interrupt like the 90 minutes of ELA or the 60 minutes of math. We use something called Class Composer to regroup our students with similar needs as we're going through the scheduling process. I'll talk a little bit about that. Really what we want to try to do is strategically schedule specials. If we can have like all third graders going to music, PE, art, and library at the same time, that means all of those teachers can now plan commonly, right? But you'll see with some of the constraints we have, that's nearly impossible to accomplish, at least on an everyday basis, right? And then finally, to go with that then is strategically scheduling specials. Again, trying to do it by grade level as best we can. Also trying to do it so that we're sort of maximizing teachers' ability to provide sort of contiguous instruction. So in other words, if a PE teacher has kindergarten and then immediately following them they have a 5th grade class coming in and immediately following that they have a 1st grade class coming in and the activities are drastically different, that's a lot of sort of maneuvering between, or art, right? That if the projects are vastly different between the grade levels coming in throughout the day, it just becomes very hard for teachers to navigate, right? So trying to schedule, if we're not able to get an entire grade level at the same time, maybe at least getting 1st grade being back-to-back in our classroom. So at least the teacher's not doing this breakdown setup 6 times a day. And then finally, daily common planning time opportunities. And then again, that directly sort of follows from if we can get special scheduled grade level at a time. Now, obviously, teachers are able to plan during that time. So these are all the things that we try to accomplish. And you'll see that there's many competing interests that make some of these things more challenging than others. Especially the last 2. So this is what a mock schedule might look like. And you can see in a perfect world, right, this school that's used as a model, every single grade level has 4 sections, right? Well, we don't have that here. Some grade levels have 4, some have 3, some have 5, right? It's never this sort of perfect. But you can see in this model, it does work where across a grade level, all of the grades, well, I'll just use the first column, if you will, that's kindergarten, right? They're all doing reading at the same time. They all have intervention at the same time. They're all doing writing, recess, lunch, like all of these things are happening at the same time. So like when students are at specials, the teachers can commonly plan. During the intervention time, if you need to sort of mix groups up, if you have 3 students struggling with a certain concept in classroom A, another couple students in classroom B, and another few in classroom C, they can now come together and work with a teacher, right? As opposed to in each classroom trying to accomplish the same thing, right? So that's what sort of an ideal schedule looks like under those assumptions. So here's where it starts to become a challenge, right? So that was a perfect schedule. K through 5 in one building, all grade levels had 4 sections. You can see we have very little consistency in terms of the number of sections across a building, right? Like Eagle comes close, but 3rd grade only has 3 sections. Ellesmere has the intensive skills program, so that sort of is another section, so it's not really 2 all the way across the board, right? And you can see no building has the same number of sections all the way across. The other thing to keep in mind is we essentially have 5 specials. Students have PE twice a week, so there's 1, 2, art, music, library, right? So in order to make that work, then you have to have things happen in sort of groups of 5. Otherwise, there's teachers kind of sitting around with no students to come to them, right? So if I was to take, like at Eagle, I have 4 sections. So if I assign art to one section, music to one section, library to one section, and one section of PE, that actually works because you're going to need a second PE teacher anyways to accomplish that. But in a building with only 3 sections, one group's going to art, one's going to music, one's going to library, what's the PE teacher doing? They're going to have to pick up another grade level. So you can see where trying to get all a single grade level going at the same time becomes problematic unless you happen to have, like within one building, all 3s and 2s that match up, right? So now I can have, like if K is 3 and first grade is 2, okay, there's a perfect 5, right? Everything has to happen in 5s in order to make it perfect, right? That also being said, you can see the number of sections, right? Contractually, teachers teach 6 sections a day, so 30 sections per week, right? So when you go back to, except for library is 25, because that allows them to do other tasks such as collection maintenance and things of that nature, right? But again, if you come back here, right, Eagle has 23 sections of art. So that's doesn't reach the threshold of 30. That person is going to have to travel to pick up additional sections somewhere, right? Ellesmere has 13 sections of art. That person's going to have to travel elsewhere. So you can see how now we have to start putting these pieces together, and that further compounds trying to get all grade levels having a special at the same time and so forth. So no building is perfect for any area except for PE, because PE meets twice a week. So at Eagle, for instance, right, we have 46 PE sections. So yeah, one person gets 30 of them, but now I still get 16 somebody has to pick up, right? Ellesmere has 26 sections. Well, a teacher needs to pick up 4 more somewhere else, and so forth, right? So traveling is inevitable. There's no way to do it unless you're going to have teachers essentially not adhering to the contract and teaching. So if I use Ellesmere as an example, right, there's 13 sections of art. So if we had a full-time art teacher at Ellesmere, they'd be teaching 13 sections, and then they'd be not teaching for 17 sections a day, right? Which you can see that contractually that's a huge issue. So how do we create equitable schedules? We used to do this sort of old school with note cards, where you kind of keep track of different kids' attributes, and the teachers would get together, they kind of shuffle the cards around, and you try to create balanced sections. For the last 6 years or so, we've been using a software called Class Composer, which teachers go in and they're able to sort of use data that we have from like iReady and state test data and some classroom data to sort of rank students on a scale of 1 to 9 in reading, math, and writing. And then we also have a couple of behavior indicators, and then we have sort of check boxes for services that students receive. And then it creates these cards, which allows the software then sort of automatically shuffles them to try to create a balanced classroom. So you can see that the very first classroom there, compared to the second one, compared to the third one, the number of boys versus girls is as balanced as it can be. The sort of number of purples versus greens versus blues versus yellows is kind of the same going from classroom to classroom, right? That also allows us very quickly, so if we have, say, 3 students in a grade level that receive speech, we might strategically place them all in the classroom so that when we do need to service them, it's much easier than trying to figure out a schedule that works for 3 separate classrooms. So we found this to be very, very successful. Basically, the way it works is teachers fill out the information, the class composer then sort of shuffles, then they come back together as a group, and then they start talking about more individualized discussions about different students. Does this make sense? Doesn't this make sense? Other things you're able to do in a system, for instance, say twins. I know some parents want twins together, some parents don't, right? So right within here, you can either say, lock these 2 students together or keep them apart. And then after it does the shuffle, it'll either do what you asked, and then if you actually try to slide them away or slide them together, it'll say, hey, wait a second, you told me these kids can't be together, but you're trying to slide them together, right? So it's just been a very, very useful platform for helping us create equitable classrooms. So that's sort of the way the elementary process works. Middle school is very, very straightforward because unlike the high school, there aren't a whole lot of options. So even though students are now changing classes, really the only option they have is what language do you want to take and whether or not you're in accelerated math. Right? Outside of that, the options are pretty limited. 8th grade, there's a couple extra options, but for the most part, the schedules are pretty standard. You can see all students are taking English 6, Science 6, Social Studies 6, Phys Ed, lunch, exploratories, and then a home base, which is where instrumental music or vocal music fit in. So really the only sort of elective, you will, or variation is within math. We have 3 different levels, and then students can choose between French or Spanish, right? That carries forward to 7th grade. Same idea, right? Students sort of just move along in the path that they're currently on, unless there's been sort of decisions made. Some students choose to change math levels. They want to go up a level or down a level. Those things happen between grade levels. But everything else you can see is still sort of standardized. 8th grade, again, same idea, except for now there are a few more options. Students do have the ability to take high school coursework in art and technology with the Project Lead the Way Intro to Engineering and Design course, which also leads to a high school credit. But you can see, again, it's very, across the 3 grades, essentially the same pattern with access to various math courses, language courses, and then in 8th grade, additional high school options in terms of art and technology. So then going from 8th to 9th grade, this is where students sort of get to make some more substantial decisions, right? Still a little bit limited because 8th, 9th grade is a little bit prescriptive, but the further along you go, the more and more choices that you have. So how do we determine how students sort of navigate from 8th to 9th grade? So essentially the 8th grade teachers enter recommendations in Aspen based upon how students are currently doing. So for an English class, a teacher might recommend a student for honors English versus regular English. Students then sit down with their counselors and they review all of the recommendations. And then the counselors, after reviewing the information with the students and sort of following up with parents, it's posted to Aspen for families to kind of do a final look over. And then once that happens, all of those requests are changed into what we, all of those, let's just say recommendations, all the recommendations are forced over to requests, which is what allows the schedule to do its building. So at the high school level, this is actually a very lengthy process. It starts sort of as soon as we get back to school in September, right? Because that's when, or a little bit over the summer, to be honest, that's where curriculum revision and development starts to take place, right? So after departments meet, teachers work on curriculum revision, developing new courses and so forth. They present those changes or new ideas to curriculum council, who then considers those recommendations and they vote on those. And after they vote on them, that is then sent to the board for consideration, typically in November. After that, once that process kind of finishes up, the course handbook is updated to reflect any changes that were made. IEPs and 504 projections are done at that time. The recommendation portal is then opened, and that's where teachers make recommendations for students. Based upon recommendations, supervisors review the requests that students are making so that they can kind of make a determination of what the sections are going to look like. And it's at that time that they determine, so if only 3 students signed up for a certain course, then the decision is made to not run that course. We typically use a threshold of 17 students to decide whether or not to run a course. After that process, we then and this is actually something that came up during some of the lab school presentations. So I do want to be clear that there are certain areas that we schedule by hand first before the regular schedule, the remaining piece of the schedule is run. So all special education courses, lab school courses, career technical education courses, Excel courses, and singletons. And just if your singleton is a course that only has 1 section, right? So those present their own sort of unique challenges in that depending on where you place them in a schedule, that can sort of lock out certain students depending on what their other choices are. So we try to make strategic decisions around singletons. So if, for instance, if there's a singleton that historically all students in advanced orchestra are taking, we would not schedule that during the same period as orchestra, right? So we kind of know from history that, hey, a lot of our orchestra students are taking this particular math class and there's only 1 section. We're not going to run them in the same period. After that, we load all of the students and we take a look at the master build to see how balanced things are. We then manually balance sections should there be discrepancies. So not always perfect, right? So sometimes 40 students sign up for a course. You'd love it to be 20 students in section A, 20 students in section B. Sometimes because of all the other parameters, that doesn't work out. 28 students end up in one section and 12 end up in the other, right? So we then don't not run the section of 12, even though we say we sort of have a threshold of 17. The threshold of 17 is an average across the course, right? So if 40 students sign up, that legitimately dictates you should have 2 sections. Not always going to be perfect where they're both above 17. After the balancing, we publish for parents and students what their course selections were, and the fact that they were actually scheduled in those. They don't see like period by period or who the teachers are. They just see that these are the 8 courses that you've been assigned. And then over the summer, that's when we sort of polish the cleanup, if you will, polish the build and make final adjustments. So that when students come back in September, they're ready to take their coursework. And I just pulled 4 sort of random schedules from 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And you can see we have students that are doing all sorts of things. Sort of, some students are accelerated, some students are taking full coursework because they're doing so many electives that they can't fit a lunch in. Some are doing multiple, say, science classes or math classes. Some are doing sort of more, if you look back at the middle school, it's very sort of analogous to what they were doing in middle school. But we have several options at the high school, which is sort of a blessing and a curse, right? The blessing is kids have opportunities to take a very, very wide breadth of coursework. The curse is that when you have that many options, you end up with many times courses that don't run because, you know, there's like this group of 10 courses that like 5 kids signed up for every single one of them. So we are trying to navigate, should we, similar to what a lot of college environments do, is we're only going to offer this course on the odd years, we're only going to order this one on the even years so that students can sort of pre-plan, and then that way it gives us more sort of predictable idea of whether or not courses are going to run. It's not perfect though, because most of the electives are junior, senior year, right? So it's hard because if you say we're only going to offer it on the odd years and it doesn't fit the student's schedule when they're a junior and they want to take it as a senior, now it's not running. So it works both ways. But that's sort of just a really high level overview of how scheduling works. And I'd be happy to answer questions.
Do you have an example of a singleton? I'm just kind of curious.
So historically, like Calc 3 and linear algebra is typically a singleton. We usually have anywhere between 20 and 24 students in that course. That's the one that comes to mind right away. Some of our technology courses, a lot of the art classes are singletons. So a lot of the electives that are sort of unique in nature that aren't the super popular ones, like you always get 20 to 25 kids sign up, but you're not getting 60, right?
Sure.
It's typically not your exploratory courses like an English 9 or an Algebra 1. It's not those type of courses. It's the more, I guess, narrow-banded, specific type courses. Obviously, a lot of our music, you only have one band, right? So, but that has an impact, right? So if a certain band has to run period 3 for whatever reason, then that becomes challenging in terms of what you try to offer opposite that. Yeah.
And I was curious, the middle school 8th grade slide,
Yeah.
what is the difference between like French 8 and French 1
Oh,
middle school?
okay, thank you. I see what you're saying. From here?
Yeah.
So the majority of our students begin taking a language in 6th grade. Some are not able to because they have other services that sort of lock their schedule. And like they might have a resource room and another special service where they don't have room in their schedule. So they're not able to then take it till sometimes 8th grade, sometimes 9th grade. So or we get transfer students, right? So if a student comes to us from another district as an 8th grader and they didn't take Spanish or French at all in 6th or 7th grade, then that's where those options develop. And we do have some students also that they don't begin the language sequence till 9th grade. But the majority of our students are taking 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Can I piggyback off of that,
Sure.
Holly? Because one of my questions was the lack of resource room depicted on any of the slides. So
Because it could go during any period, so I tried, yeah. I mean, I guess I could have thrown it in with home-based band orchestra choir, I just chose not to. Because there's a bunch of other services too. Students that are in AIS math or AIS reading, sometimes it's during home base, sometimes it's a standalone period during the day. So I just tried to keep it sort of generic, yeah.
okay, just to remember that those
No,
are
I know they exist.
classes
Yeah, I know they
normalize them. Okay.
I can follow up actually the same thing, because I know we've been discussing the possibility of trying to get language as early as possible, given that's what the data, I know you know, the earlier the better. That would basically be like a 6th special for an elementary schedule, is that how that would work?
So, that's the way the districts that do it offer foreign language in the elementary school. So I am actually going to survey teachers to kind of see priorities, because in just speaking with some teachers, some would love to have an extra pull-out of STEM. Some would love to have an extra pull-out of health, right? Some would love to have an extra pull-out of foreign language or world language, right? So some would love to have PE 3 times a week, right? So it's not just about one more section, right? So it's also about what's the priority in terms of what, I guess, elementary teachers and principals are looking for as a collective. And it also, again, going back to this, right? Our day is already very, very tight, right? So like science and social studies is listed on there. As you would know if you had children go through elementary, there's days that it's just not gotten to because of all the other competing interests. So, yeah. Catherine?
While we're in elementary school, or the elementary scheduling, one question that I've heard from parents is like, is younger grade levels, is the amount of recess time we have versus the amount of time of just straight up instructional learning. And I'm not here against instructional learning, but I'm also here for recess. And so I'm wondering how that weighs into our considerations and how, where does that fall in priorities?
So, I
as we
mean,
figure this
recess
out?
by structure is 25 minutes a day. I would say that the students have unstructured play, if you will, in their classrooms, especially K2, every day. I mean, most classrooms that I've been in, even during the instructional piece, they take breaks to do things like Go Noodle, they do yoga, they build in unstructured play time. During snack time, it's unstructured. There's plenty of opportunities within the day. We just don't call it recess. So I would say the K2 teachers are very aware that you're not going to sit through a 6.5-hour day and only have 40 or 25 minutes of recess. Like those activities and unstructured things are certainly built in throughout the day.
And I think the elementary students are on your side on this. More recess.
All the way through fifth.
Well, it's good. I am.
And I said unstructured play, but it's also purposeful play, right? There's many ways of doing learning activities that involve play. So the kids are still up and being active, but they're actually cognitively involved in some activity, right? Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you.
If we can schedule therapy dogs every
Yeah.
session too, I'm sure the students would like that.
They would probably like that too. So, and this is just something I think maybe I didn't realize. So with the elementary scheduling, you assign when the specials are going to be. Does the teacher then decide when they want to do the other parts of the day? Or do we say like, okay, you will do, your special is here and you're going to do your 90 minutes of ELA and like.
So
how
that's the
does-
challenge. And actually, in an ideal world, you would sort of want to dictate when those things are being done, because that's the only way you can guarantee that the intervention block is here, the specials here across grade levels, right? Most of the time, we just can't make that happen, so teachers tend to have flexibility. Now, I know grade level counterparts many times will try to follow a similar schedule, or I know a lot of it depends on when the special falls. Like if we can't say that the special is going to be at 10 o'clock every single day, then now some days it's in the morning, some days it's in the afternoon. So now that kind of dictates when I have to put my ELA instruction versus my math instruction, right? Because if my special falls at a particular part in the day where I can't even get 90 minutes in before it, then maybe I can only get an hour, then maybe it dictates that I'm going to do math in the morning that day and ELA later in the day or vice versa. And that's the challenge, is that no building is perfect. And it's funny, that's when you look at best practices. Well, best practices work in like that utopian school that I showed you, where it was 4 sections across the board in every single grade level. When you have traveling teachers, now that compounds things, because now if Eagle has PE in the morning and one of the teachers there is one of the travelers that has to go to Hammer Grill in the afternoons, they can't have them be there in the morning also. So now Hammergale can only have PE in the afternoon for certain grade levels, right? So then you try to say, okay, so now art, when we schedule that one, we're going to make sure that Hammergale has art in the morning, because you can't put all their specials in the afternoon, right? So it becomes this pulling, that's what it takes, we're starting the process now. It takes a long time to really navigate where the different specials fall. And we don't dictate to the buildings. Sort of the way it works is the special area schedule teachers come together because they have to all work sort of in concert to make sure that, like I said, you can't have all 4 specials in the afternoon in a certain building, because then that means there's nothing available in the morning, so that won't work. So they kind of hash out like what part of the day specials are going to be, and then the principals take that information and say, okay, I know that I have art in the morning 5 days a week, so I'm going to make sure that this is the way it works, and so forth.
There are also situations where ENL teachers or special ed teachers are pushing in for a
Right.
block of time. And so that is when ELA or math have to typically happen during those times. So that also limits when, and so specials wouldn't be assigned then, so there's.
Right, or if we have half-day co-tots, and like say one co-tot is an AM co-tot and another one is a PM co-tot, the AM co-tot has to have the ELA and math in the morning, and then the PM co-tot has to have the ELA and math in the afternoon, because that's what the purpose of the co-tot is.
Not to mention related service providers serving however many
Right.
kids
Right.
in multiple buildings in
Right.
and out all day, having to pull them out or push into whatever specific class they're getting.
Right.
So our goal is, we recognize there's no way we're going to get this every single day, but are there 1 day a week, 2 days a week, where we can get common planning time for teachers or common intervention time for teachers? Because there's a huge benefit to that in terms of trying to schedule other services or grouping kids together across classrooms.
Sure.
Going,
Yeah, I was just going to say, other questions on the elementary school, as long as we're here.
Go ahead, sure.
One question, so from the teachers' side of it, for our specialist teachers, I know that at times we've had folks who are traveling a lot, right? Where we've got particular individuals who are hitting a number of schools, and maybe this is all the time. But do we take into consideration how that is divvied up and how that's made equitable, or how we address that year to year, or is it just like?
I mean, we obviously, we limit travel as much as possible. Like I said, there's just some areas where there's just no working around folks traveling, right? We try to limit it to 2 different buildings. Sometimes it just doesn't work, though. We also try to limit it if we can, where maybe like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you're in building A, Tuesday, Thursday, you're in building B, so you're not traveling within the day.
Yeah.
So the priorities are for traveling teachers, obviously, to limit the number of buildings as best we can, try to make the travel so that it's on different days as opposed to within a day, but some of those things are just completely unavoidable, so you try to do it in as equitable way as you can.
Yeah, because I could imagine how that adds up for those teachers who are working, especially in multiple elementary schools, where those are, where they are both schools with classes and their communities, where teachers are monitoring emails from both, and they're working with, with different teacher clusters in both and things like that, so that's
We do
something.
also have some traveling teachers who are at the middle or high school and go to
Right.
elementary too.
Mm.
That's,
Oh.
so it's not just between elementary.
Thank you.
Sometimes it makes more sense to have someone, start at the middle school and then they go to the elementary. So
Right.
there's travel between those levels because they're all K-12 as well.
Yeah,
So
so it's I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to exclude that possibility. It just seems like the more schools you have, the more communities you're also
Right.
functioning and being part of, and your emails and the administrative load of that, I would imagine, is substantial as well.
For sure.
Yeah, so this is more of a kind of philosophical, anyway, we'll see. So you were talking about equitable classes, and I know that was in part balancing perceived abilities and so on, which is the opposite of what we then do with math in particular, where you section people out. And I just wonder what...
Not at the elementary level.
Right, but when you get to middle school, you start
Right.
streaming math streams.
Mhm.
When was that choice made? What drives it to have mixed ability versus streamed ability? 'Cause I'm not advocating for either one. I'm just curious what the
Yeah,
basis is.
I mean, it's been that, I can only speak to the 15 years I've been here, it's been that way, so the decision was made at least 15 years ago.
Okay.
And I would say I've gone to a few different scheduling conferences over the 15 years, and I would say that that's sort of what, I don't want to call it best practice, but that's what most districts do. Is,
I mean, it's certainly how I
Yeah.
was educated.
yeah.
So
Because as you can imagine, there's a danger to sort of labeling and tracking kids early on, right?
Right.
Because then they have this, they figure out pretty quickly what, even if you don't tell them, they figure out pretty quickly which classroom
Yep.
is sort of the low class, the middle class, and the high class. And that, especially if you're first, second grade and all of a sudden, and you recognize where you are, that can have detrimental effect in
Okay.
terms of how you move on, yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. So why do it for math? What is the driving force behind scheduling different math sections?
Well, the challenge with math is, it really has to do with the tail end of things, right? For students to sort of get where they need to, that any student that's sort of a math, science, engineering, STEM field, college preparation, they want to take calculus as a senior, right, at a minimum. So you can't achieve that without accelerating at some point, right? And I think math's just one of those disciplines too, where it's, because it's so content-driven, that as opposed to English, where you can just call it, well, I mean, even at the other courses, that once you get into high school, you've got honors level, you've got AP level. So, we are doing it once we get into high school, I guess. Math just needs to start a little bit sooner in order to get that sort of gateway of calculus. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Other questions on the elementary?
One last one. How, if at all, does this scheduling conversation play into the conversation we were having during the budget presentations about shifting the way that we are supporting our students with additional needs? So we were talking about, if I'm remembering correctly, shifting aid support to more program level support, which I guess I'm not entirely certain I still understand yet, but rather than tracking to individual students. Does scheduling play into that at all?
No, because special education, like the classes themselves are scheduled separately.
Okay.
So where the aid support goes is
Different
it's
thing.
a different conversation, yeah.
Thank you.
Questions about the middle school? Questions about?
Only,
Oh.
sorry, I don't have a question, and it's not even directly related to the presentation, but I'm going to use the opportunity to put in a plug for the transition from elementary to middle school and the sort of absence of parent preparation in that conversation, particularly for parents of students who do receive supports. And that transition around what that schedule looks like and how it feels like is, I know we want sixth graders to become very independent, and I think most of our sixth graders are able to sort of make that transition.
I wouldn't say independent.
Well,
That's a stretch.
pretty
Just
independent.
More independent
It is
than
a
they were
big
in
difference.
fifth grade.
On the road, too.
Reward.
A big difference between
It
fifth
is.
grade, what you expect from a fifth
It
grader
is.
and a sixth grader. Especially in terms of how homework, where it
Yes.
lives and how you find it and when you know what you're behind in and how things are submitted. And there's a lot of independence that's developed there. And for students who require additional support in particular, that transition is nasty. And it is not about this presentation, but I'm just using the opportunity to think about it next year. If there's more we can do to offer parents like a 101 on Aspen, or, I mean, I joke all the time. I literally took a day off of work and came and sat at the middle school and forced them to teach me how to find things on Aspen because I just couldn't figure out how to utilize it. So there is not a question, and you don't have to feel like you need to respond.
I would underline that, and as I haven't worked through additional supports, but I will say that going from elementary school to middle school as a parent, I absolutely support how much can we make sure that these kids are owning their own education and their own transition, their own work. And also, there are times when as a parent, I need to support that kid. And I too struggled greatly, and I feel like a workshop, a webinar, a something about like where you're going to find homework, how you're going to, that kind of thing. We got a little bit of it during the I want to say tour, but it was more than that. But that could be strengthened.
Other questions about middle school? You look like you want Catherine.
Yeah, just one. I know we talked about this a couple of years ago. We've got, I think we're at 2-minute passing time. Could you speak a little bit to that and how and why? And is there anything that we can be doing to figure that out differently?
So two things. So the way state aid works is we have the 180-day requirement.
Yeah.
Well, they also now have a minute requirement. And so the way our middle school schedule, and only instructional minutes count. So if we were to extend passing time beyond 2 minutes, we would be short on instructional time. So that means we'd have to, if we're going to make passing time longer, the other things that are non-instructional are things like lunch, so we can make lunch shorter. Homeroom, you can make shorter. But so 2 minutes was chosen because I know the middle school felt that the homeroom time needed to be protected, and that's when, again, going back to middle school students being middle school students that you were just talking about, right? That's when they get
Yeah.
their morning announcements. That's when teachers get them settled in. That's where they get all their materials, kind of make sure they're squared up for the day. So they feel like that's a very, very important time. I will say, having been in the middle school, it's 2 minutes sounds like it's impossible to make work. But the way the kids are scheduled, most of their courses are in very close proximity. And even those that aren't, kids figure out a way. Like if you go to the middle school, like shortly after the bell to beginning class rings, you don't see kids like scrambling all over the building because they couldn't get to where they need to. To me, having been in the building enough times, observing classes where I don't see kids like running in the door right at the last second, and also being there during passing times when that finishes up, still seeing kids lingering in the hall, I don't see it as an issue. So, but if it is, I guess someone would have to point out to me
Yeah,
how
I
or
have
why.
to say that it sounded awful until I did a bunch of middle school visits, and there really are, for the most part, like crossing the hallway, and
And our teachers are
teachers are very
forgiving.
liberal with
Yes.
bathroom passes, and,
Yeah, so if you're running to PE and you have to go across the building, they understand that, 2 minutes is probably tight, and they allow grace there.
When we
Yeah.
had 3 minutes, we weren't meeting the
Right.
requirements.
And I wonder, and I'll say this, and it's, it may not be possible, but if we can consider, what would it look like to add 10 minutes to middle school day so that we can hit the at least 3-minute passing? Because what I've heard from students is that is a different perspective, one of much more inflexibility, one where it is much harder to get to. And so I can't even imagine what the logistics are of changing the length of, I can imagine, and I'm sure I'm not imagining the full breadth of it. Yes, buses, teacher contracts, all of it. Some of these things, though, are going to be coming up for conversation in the next year. And so I wanted to just put that out on the table.
Yeah, and I also do know from experience that the longer you make passing times, kids figure out how to use it, right? So it's like when 3 minutes isn't enough, so you go to 4 minutes, and also in 4 minutes is enough, and the hallways are still full, even though 3 minutes worked. So we can certainly make sure the teachers are aware that they need to be somewhat flexible with that. But if that's not happening, but it seems to be working, yeah.
I just had a quick question regarding the 8th grade, that you can get credit, high school credit in 8th grade. How's that communicated? Because I went through that process and I didn't know that that was an option. And I didn't realize the importance of it,
So
and how much I wish I had known about that when my child was in 8th grade.
yeah, so it typically works through, because the students are enrolled in Art 7 and Engineering Basics 1, typically those are the courses that identify students that would benefit from more advanced work in either art or engineering. And that's where the initial conversation takes place, and then follow-up conversations happen with the counselors. Yeah.
Okay. Can that information be communicated not just to kids who are identified as perhaps they would appreciate the
Mhm.
more advanced work, but a lot of kids would love to get art credit so that they could do a different art class or do a different elective the next
Yep.
year. So I think that
Sure.
information.
I think, though, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the intent of that was for students, when we started the art program, I believe the reason that we started the art and the technology was because kids were coming to high school and they were struggling to meet the higher end art classes or tech classes, so
Right.
it wasn't really intended to be offered so that they didn't have to take that in high school and could take something else. It was designed.
Right.
So I think that's why the teachers are targeting the kids who they believe want to continue in like 5 years of art or
Right.
5 credits in art, more so than it was
Yeah.
in lieu of taking that in high school.
Right, it's to provide them the opportunity to complete the full sequence.
Correct.
Understood.
Yeah,
but
yeah, for
teachers
sure.
Don't always know who those kids are.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah.
for sure.
And then I just wanted to thank you for this presentation and also for all the work that goes into this because, you know, it's very easy as people outside the process just to say, oh, just change that schedule, just do that. And you can see how much work goes into it all year round, so I appreciate it.
Questions? Are you still on middle school?
Just about this slide, actually. So I know
Oh, there's
if-
yeah, actually, I just recognized 2 typos. It should say music 8 and art 8, but.
Oh, I don't care about that. So in 6th and 7th grade, if you have resource room on your schedule, then you're not taking French or Spanish 6 or 7. And then in 8th grade, is it art and engineering that you're not taking?
It depends on the student.
Okay.
I wouldn't say there's a blanket answer for that. And also, I do believe depending on the student's needs, I think some students have pull out during home base and are still able to access the language. It all has to do with frequency
Okay.
and duration. Yeah.
Questions about the high school?
I have one question.
Go ahead.
And maybe it was there and I just didn't see it. I'm wondering about high school students who enroll in the CTE program and when in the time cycle that happens.
So, yeah, so typically, it's juniors and seniors. It happens during the same process. The challenge there is, but here's the challenge, right? So some of those CTE courses are in-house and some are external. The challenge with the external ones is students apply to the program, but they don't necessarily know whether they get in. So like some students, we don't find out till over the summer that they got waitlisted, and now we have to kind of scramble and change their whole schedule. Or they put in for AM CTE at BOCES, like they put in for auto mechanics for AM, and they end up with a PM. So now we have to kind of flip their schedule. So what we try to do, it's not perfect, but what we try to do is make sure we sort of have an idea of certain courses students are going to need. So we'll make sure that at least one section is scheduled in the AM and one is scheduled in the PM, so that regardless of which of those sections a CTE student might have to travel to BOCES, they're able to come back and take the necessary coursework. That's really one of the largest challenges because of the way our day, like it's not a perfect split. So I know some of our morning CTE students, when they come back, they actually only have 3 periods realistically to make up half a day, not 4, right? So there are logistical challenges with the CTE program, but we make different accommodations to get it to work for kids.
Thanks.
Catherine?
At what point in Bethlehem do students start taking both band and orchestra, if that's, I mean, sorry, let me take a step back. I didn't go to high school here. In my high school, I played in both the band and the orchestra because of the instrument I played and so on and so forth. Does that happen in 8th or 9th grade at some point here?
It's rare, but kids can double up if it works for them. But they typically, the sequence is typically 4th grade is when you can start strings, and 5th grade is when you start other types of instruments. That's not to say you can't start off cycle, but that's when the process truly begins.
But does our high school orchestra have like percussion and?
Oh, yes, for sure.
Like,
Yeah.
right, the
Yeah.
bassoonist
Yeah,
going back and
Yeah,
forth?
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Do they play in both, so do they play in both, or do you play in?
Yes.
Sometimes.
It depends on the
Play
student.
jazz band and, you know,
Yeah.
stuff.
Right,
A
okay.
lot of it comes down to choices, right? So if students have room in their schedule, they might do multiple.
Got it.
Students
that's
that want
like
to take advantage of
substitute.
other electives, they have to make a choice of which one they're going to do.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it, thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions about the high school?
Oh, yes. Yeah, may I? Sorry?
Go ahead.
Lunch. I was really surprised to learn, when I did learn, that not all of our high school students get or take a lunch.
Yeah, so I wouldn't use the
How
word
does
get,
that
it's
work?
choose to
It's their
take.
choice.
It's their choice. So many students feel that, there's a lot of reasons why students don't. Some take it because they want their schedule to be full, right? They want to take advantage of all 8 periods of the day. So they might take an extra art class or other, and then, so I guess the argument that some will make is that students need lunch as their downtime, if you will. But for some students, lunch is actually the most stressful point in their day, right? For whatever reason. They don't want to go to the lunchroom. They would rather take an extra art class. That's their relief. They can eat at another point during the day. They don't necessarily need to go to the cafeteria, right? Some students, their release is music. So they'd rather take 2 music courses or they'll be in 2 different bands so that they can, that's their release for the day, right? So students make choices based on what they feel works best for them. We allow students to eat, the students that don't have a lunch can eat in classrooms.
And that's accommodated?
Oh, absolutely, outside of science classrooms.
I was gonna say, except
Or
science.
tech, classrooms where there's like safety issues.
Right.
Yeah, but we have quite a few students that, I haven't run the numbers in a while, but I want to say it used to be somewhere between 30 and 40% of our students that choose not to take a lunch.
Wow, okay.
In my experience, it tends to be students that want to take multiple electives.
Yes.
So maybe they want to do, an art class and chorus, that kind of thing. So in
Yeah.
order to fit both of them in.
Yeah, the perception I know early on was that students are skipping their lunch or choosing not to take a lunch so that they can take 8 AP courses. And that's typically not the case. It's students that are taking multiple electives. A lot of times it's multiple art electives, multiple music electives, things of that nature. Some students double up in a language, some take French and Spanish.
And
But
at
it's,
what,
yeah.
and at what grade can they choose to not have a full day where you just take the?
Like
Yeah.
come in late, you mean?
What's that? Either coming
like
late or
coming
leaving
early.
early because they've only got XYZ number.
Seniors.
Senior year?
Mhm.
That's it? Okay.
But when you say a full day, some students might have a lunch and a study hall at the earlier grades. They don't necessarily have academic all 8 periods of the day, or 7 with the lunch.
Thank you.
And I think especially with the ninth graders, I know there is an effort to, if you have a ninth grader who doesn't have a lunch in their schedule, to try to slot PE kind of in that time so that when they have that, because PE doesn't meet every day, when they have the kind of corresponding free period, that
yeah.
happens at lunchtime. So then they at least have, once or twice a week, they have that
Yeah.
time.
Thank you. Cool.
Although sometimes that gets eaten by lab classes too.
Right.
Well,
It does. It's not perfect.
but yeah.
I'll get to high school
Ju-
eventually,
Just
but
for
thank you.
context, neither one of my kids ever took a lunch. ever.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next on the agenda is our recognition of public comment on an agenda item. If we have any visitors who would like to address the board on an agenda item, now is the time to come to the microphone. Next, item 6, action items. A, finance action items. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following finance action items 1 through 5.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion?
Yeah.
Yep.
Just a thanks, we have funds for scholarship awards, we've got the American Heart Association donation, and we've got the local food for local schools award, and that's just great, that's just really wonderful, so, just a note of gratitude.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. B, professional personnel action items. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following professional personnel action items 1 through 16.
So moved.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes. C, support personnel action items. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following support staff action items 1 through 5.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes. D, other action items. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following action item 1.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Item 7, recognition of public comment on a non-agenda item. If we have any visitors who would like to address the board on a non-agenda item, now is the time to come to the microphone. Item 8, future meetings and events. Monday, April 15th, there is a facilities committee meeting at 5:30 here at the high school. And then Monday, April 22nd, at 6 o'clock at the high school, there is a policy committee meeting. Our next regularly scheduled board meeting is on April 24th, anticipating executive session at 6 and reconvening to open session at 7. And then our meeting following that is on May 8th, again anticipating executive session at 6 and reconvening open session at 7. I will just want to make sure, just to note for all of the board members that that May 8th day, that's sort of off, that's the day that the meeting day we had to move around because of the budget, so it's not the first, normally we meet the first and the third Wednesday. This is not the first Wednesday.
And it's BCMS, not.
So, thank you for pointing that out. It is BCMS. And maybe when we get closer, Brittany, if you could make a note to remind us all so that we go to the right place. But anyway, just to make a note of that, that date. Seeing no need to go back into executive session, could I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.